In the mid-19th century, the world was captivated by a bold experiment. France's ambitions attempt to establish a monarchy in Mexico. But how powerful an empire, led by Napoleon III, find itself mired in a conflict that would end in failure? Join us as we explore the intricate web of politics, military strategy, and cultural clash that led to France's unexpected defeat in Mexico. From the motivations behind the imperial venture to the fierce resistance of the Mexican people, we'll unravel the events that shaped this pivotal moment in Mexican history. And a special thanks to Griffin Johnsen and the Armchair Historian group for their incredible work in bringing the story to life. His dedication and creativity have helped make this video both engaging and informative. Now, before we go really into it, I just want to discuss the main players of this situation. So, obviously, I mentioned Napoleon III. So pretty much, and I'm pretty sure Griffin is going to talk about this in the video, but Mexico, following the Mexican-American War, was a country in struggle. The Mexican Republic was kind of proving not to be working out well. You had groups of people of Mexican descent, some with a little stronger Spanish descent, thinking they deserved better. Those of regular descent wanted a republic. So you would have one group, Benito Juárez. He would be the leader of the Republicans. He'd be the president of Mexico. And then the other group would be led by Maximilian I. Now, he's in charge of Imperial Mexico, but his name isn't actually Maximilian. His name is Ferdinand Maximilian Joseph Maria von Habsburg Lothringen. He's a German prince. He's actually the brother to the Austrian Emperor, Francis II. No, not Francis. He's actually, Franz Joseph II's brother. So what happens is Napoleon sets up this arrangement so he can gain influence in Mexico. So Maximilian is sent to Mexico in 1864. Now, why is this so dangerous? Well, the United States, when we create something called the Monroe Doctrine. James Monroe declares that the Western Hemisphere is the Western Hemisphere's business, and European powers can no longer get involved. Napoleon III knows this, and he's watching the American Civil War break out. At the beginning of the war, he's actually approached by the Confederate States to have them join the Confederate war effort. But when Abraham Lincoln in 1862 declares general emancipation for slaves in states in rebellion, Napoleon has to pull out of that, any possible future arrangements of alliance, because Napoleon does not want to be, I'm just going to say Napoleon, but I'm talking about Napoleon III. Napoleon doesn't want to be associated with a state that believes in slavery. His country is supposed to be that of the French Revolution, continuation of his uncle's French Empire, the ideas of freedom, liberty, and liberalism. So he still wants influence, though. He still wants to have a solid trade with North America. So he approaches the House of Habsburg, and he tells Ferdinand, you should accept from the Spanish descent Mexicans the crown of Mexico and become emperor, and I'll help you. So he arrives in Mexico in 1864. He's declared emperor of Mexico. The Republicans don't like that. Benito Juárez does not like that. Benito Juárez has been the president of the Republic by general election. So we're now set up for something very dangerous to happen. And when the Mexican Republicans declare war, Napoleon III will send 38,000 troops to support the Imperial Mexicans. And they'll be supported by Spanish, English, Austrians, Belgians, even Ottomans, and even 2,000 Confederates as a show of goodwill to the French to come in on their side, hopefully. But I think with that, we have enough background, and we can get into Griffin's video, because Griffin does, as always, a fantastic job. Please go and follow the Armchair Historian. I'll be honest, you probably already follow him if you follow me because he's much more well known than me. But today we are going to be reacting to how did France lose to Mexico.
Hi, I'm Griffin Johnsen, the Armchair Historian. Today's video, how France fought Mexico to put an Austrian into power only to be stopped by the...
Griffin, I see you with that little Stonewall Jackson statue in that corner. I see that little Stonewall Jackson and his little curio there next to the Roman. It's funny because I actually have a Lee on that on the bookshelf.
The United States. I promise it'll all make sense soon. I'm very pleased to announce that today's video is sponsored by the Great Courses Plus. More on that later. The Franco-Mexican War might seem like somewhat of a strange conflict.
So just to get it started, he just referred to it as the Franco-Mexican War. Some people did call it that. It's more well known in the United States as the Second French Intervention in Mexico, just because it was a 5-year war starting December of 1861 and not ending until 67. But it was pretty much France intervening on the affairs of Mexico. So it's called the Second French Intervention in Mexico. It is also called the Second Franco-Mexican War, but it's more commonly remembered as the intervention. Just because and Griffin's not wrong by saying that, but a lot of people do recognize it as that.
But you might be surprised to find out that this wasn't the first time that France and Mexico went to war, and in the same century, too. The one we're covering today is the second of these conflicts, typically referred to as the Second French Intervention in Mexico. Unfortunately, we don't have a witty sobriquet to refer to it as, like the Pastry War, which was what the first intervention came to be known as. But funny nicknames aside, today we'll be discussing the prelude, course, and aftermath of the war that would be the beginning of the end for Napoleon III's imperial ambitions.
And that's very true. Napoleon III, he is actually a failed kind of Bonaparte. His father, he's actually the closest to Napoleon's legitimate heir through his first marriage that he was ever going to get. Napoleon I was married to Josephine de Beauharnais. She was the Countess de Beauharnais. Her husband was guillotined during the French Revolution. She had 2 daughters. And oh my gosh, how do I forget their names? That's embarrassing. His mother's name was Hortense, but give me 1 second because I'm going to see the name and I'm going to hate myself because I know the name. I knew it was Eugene. So de Beauharnais, before his execution, has 2 children with Josephine, Hortense and Eugene. Eugene would go on to become an officer in the French Revolutionary Army, and he would actually later become viceroy and hold a principality, which they actually, after the Napoleonic era, would allow him to keep, which was very shocking as he was Napoleon's adopted son. Hortense, however, would marry Napoleon's brother Louis, and she would become the Queen of Holland. Obviously, when the monarchy falls, she will fall with it, with her husband. So they'll go into exile into Switzerland, where Napoleon III, whose name is Louis Napoleon, he will be raised by Swiss tutors. He'll learn about the French Revolution and all that jazz. But he will actually make an attempt to have a coup d'etat of the French government on the anniversary of his uncle, in which he will fail miserably. And when I say miserably, I mean miserably. Like, he wanted to be so much like his uncle, but the thing was, he didn't actually have his uncle's charisma. So from 1836 to 1840, he'll go into exile into England. And then 1848, he'll try a second coup, get locked up, and go back into exile. Now, he will return to France after 1848, and he actually will become France's first elected president. That's right. Now, he's a provisional president. He's really not supposed to be in charge a long time. He actually uses people like Victor Hugo and Adolphe Thiers to keep him in power. I'm actually going to redo my Franco-Prussian War series, because this is a subject I love, the Second Empire. It's fascinating how he did it. He based a lot of it off the United States, how we do things. But so what he does is, once he's president, he wants to, obviously he thinks he's popular because of his name, but he's not. So when he has a second election and he loses, he dissolves the Republic and declares himself Emperor Napoleon III. And give me 1 second. I wanna show you a picture of him, because I want to show you his hubris. So right here, this is what he thought of himself. He thought he legitimately was the successor to his uncle. But he wasn't. He was nothing like his uncle. He was a good bureaucrat. He was a very good politician. He was very sickly, though. He was not a very powerful figure. He liked to have these paintings made of him to make himself look more powerful and strong, because he wanted to be his uncle so bad. But this is how he wanted France to view him. Oh, God, I hate... Give me 1 second. But, so this is how he wanted France to view him. This was not who he really was, though. He was, like I said, he was a sickly man. He was very, he was actually unmarried when he first entered the throne, because of, you know, who wants to be married to this guy who's nothing. This is actually what he looked like. He tried to be his uncle, and it just wasn't working out. And he thought if he did these expansions, he could become his uncle. And it's actually kind of comical that it's actually under the Republic that France becomes a bigger empire than under either emperors. But let's get back into it, because I've been a little too long on this Napoleon III thing.
Between 1857 and 1861, Mexico was embroiled in a civil war, fought between the conservatives, who espoused the Catholic Church and the central government, and the liberals, who espoused democracy and equality.
So this is what I was saying before, and this actually will, and I'm not doing this to get into any political statements, but this will kind of be a race thing. The conservatives, most of them are of Spanish descent. What does that mean? They're lighter skinned. So they look more European. They are more religious. They're more theological. They pretty much want a Spanish monarchy in Mexico. The liberals, that's under Juarez, they are mixed race. They are mixed with the native-born Mexicans, and they're mixed with the Spanish. Juarez is one of these folks, and they believe in republicanism, and that's how Juarez becomes president. He's elected by general election, and the centralists don't like that.
The conflict began after the conservatives, who were unhappy with the results of the election and the reforms being instituted, rose up in revolt against the liberals. In 1861, the liberals won the war, with Benito Juárez being recognized as president and bringing an end to the bloodshed in Mexico forever. Except that wasn't the end of it. See, during the Civil War, both sides borrowed a lot of money from Spain, France, and Great Britain. When the liberals won, these powers expected them to pay compensation, not only for...
And with that, remember the powers I told you that joined France in the intervention. Spain, England, and France all went. And of course Austria was going to go, because they're prince was now the emperor of Mexico. And this is what really, and Juarez will have a lot of problems like this throughout his administrations.
For the money that they borrowed, but for the money the conservatives also borrowed. The liberals weren't enthusiastic about the idea, to say the least, so the European powers decided that they would seize their recompense instead. The plan was simple: strong-arm Mexico into paying for the wall. Wait, that's not right. Strong-arm Mexico into paying for the war, but no.
So this is a very common, I'm sorry I keep stopping it, like I said in my other videos, this is actually how I do these videos as reactions, because I explain the details that they're not. This is a common thing they do. This is actually kind of how the English conquered India in a weird way. And this is also how the European powers, I guess you could say the Western powers in Japan, conquered China. It was these spheres of influence that they would set up. Now, France at the time, France is actually the biggest power in Europe at this time. They are the strongest military power in Europe. Right after them would be Prussia, and after them is Austria. Now, Austria, there's a debate who was actually more powerful, but the Prussian military, just in skill, was probably more powerful, and more powerful than France as well, as we would later find out.
Napoleon III had other plans. After all, he had a lot to live up to. His intention was not to simply collect debts, but to take over all of Mexico, and to do that, he would need a monarch who would serve as his puppet. That's precisely where Archduke Maximilian comes in, a Habsburg who had been approached by Mexican monarchists before, and could claim to be the rightful ruler of the now defunct territory in New Spain. In December 1861, the European coalition comprising France, Great Britain, and Spain captured Veracruz with little to no resistance. Exact numbers are hard to come by, but we believe that the invading force numbered some 6,000 men, whereas the Mexican army could only field some 3,000 men at the time. With such a hefty numerical advantage, the Europeans crept ever closer to Mexico City, capturing 3 cities along the way. Then
this will also be one of the first wars you'll see the French Foreign Legion fight in. They were actually pretty much made for this war. So that's another interesting fact that goes along with this war.
Seemingly out of nowhere, another French fleet arrived, capturing Campeche in February 1862. That cleared the way for an entirely new French army to land in April under the command of General Charles de Lorenzo. This army came not to collect debt, but to begin the conquest of the country. Napoleon III had thereby revealed his hand, and the British and Spanish decided that they would have none of it. I mean, did you really expect that the French and British would be able to work together? By the end...
What's funny about that statement, I was going to stop anyway because I was going to explain something. What's funny about that statement is actually Napoleon III and Victoria had a very good relationship. This is actually where you start seeing the Franco-English, the Anglo-Franco alliance start, where England and France become close. But if you notice something, the French need to move quick. It's 1862. The American Civil War is raging. If the Union Army is successful, they could muster 5 million men who are already armed and ready. 5 million men who can enforce the Monroe Doctrine. The entire U.S. fleet is at sea because of the blockade. If they were to beat the Confederacy in dual time, they could redirect the entire fleet to Mexico to assist Juarez. So he has to move quick. And the issue is, Spain and England both know this too. They're like, this was not what we were signing up for. We thought this was to get our money. Why are you landing troops in the other part of the country? I thought we were just coming to reclaim our funds. And Napoleon's like, I don't know. It's a very dangerous game that Napoleon is playing.
the end of the month, only French troops remained on Mexican soil. France had to secure its precarious position while reinforcements were shipped across the Atlantic, so it concluded a ceasefire with Mexico. But Lorenzo had other plans. He initiated a series of skirmishes, after which he laid siege to the city of Puebla. The Mexican general Zaragoza had about 4,500 men at his disposal, stationed in a well-fortified position on 2 hills just northeast of the city. General de Lorenzo had 6,000 men. He immediately ordered a headlong attack against Puebla from the north, which was repelled. De Lorenzo then attacked again, bolstering his numbers by committing his reserves and orchestrating a diversionary attack on the eastern part of the city. Both attacks were initially more successful than the first, but they were repelled all the same. Nevertheless, de Lorenzo ordered a third attack, an ill-fated one, as his artillery was out of ammunition. It was a complete disaster. Now it was Zaragoza's turn. It's the climactic counterattack you've been waiting for, with the French being attacked on both flanks simultaneously by the Mexican cavalry and charged head-on by the infantry. The festival of Cinco de Mayo is actually meant to celebrate this victory, not Mexican independence.
That's something I think a lot of people don't realize, that Cinco de Mayo is not like their 4th of July. It kind of is in a sense, but it's not Mexican Independence Day. It's the day that they chased the invaders out of Mexico, pretty much. And they didn't really, they just won the second, this is referred to as the Second Battle of Puebla. They were able to push the French back, and that was impressive, especially considering, like I said before, France is the dominant military power in the world at this point. You know, the United States probably is technically, but by all accounts, France is one of the stronger nations. So people are now like, whoa, these random Mexican Republicans were able to beat the Imperial French army. You don't think someone like Otto von Bismarck saw that and was like, very good?
But the war was not won yet. On the eastern coast of Mexico, the French expanded their foothold until the end of 1862. When Zaragoza died, the French returned to Puebla under a different general, Élie Frédéric Faure. He was in less of a hurry to take it, and in March 1863 he besieged the city with 26,000 men. After a grueling...
My bad. First Battle of Puebla, Cinco de Mayo. This is the Second Battle of Puebla. I need to correct myself if I'm wrong, and I was just wrong there, so my apologies.
2-month siege, the defenders, despite several relief efforts and sortie attempts, were forced to surrender in May 1863. The road to Mexico City now lay open to the French. In May, Juarez and the Mexican government took flight from the capital and made for Chihuahua. 1 week later, on June 7, 1863, French troops stormed Mexico City. The second phase of the French conquest of Mexico had now begun, installing Maximilian and keeping him in power. To convince him to take the crown, Napoleon provided him with results from a rigged election. He accepted the crown in October of that same year and began working on...
It's sad that Maximilian ended up just being a useful idiot for Napoleon, and he would suffer because of it. Maximilian's actually married to the daughter of the King of Belgium. So, oh no, not Belgium. She's not married to the King of Belgium. I think Napoleon was. Wait, I think, give me one moment. I want to make sure I'm correct with these. Because she goes to Belgium after everything hits the fan. Yeah, oh no, she is Charlotte. I gotta stop second guessing myself because I was right. Yeah, he's married to Charlotte of Belgium, and she becomes Carlotta, Empress Carlotta, because she wants to embrace Mexican tradition, and her and Maximilian have been convinced by Napoleon that they want us. They want us here. They don't understand that they just conquered a country.
on a series of progressive reforms, making the country more open to democracy, abolishing a Mexican form of serfdom, ending child labor, and even limiting work hours. Mexican conservatives lent him tepid support. French and Imperial Mexican forces remained victorious on the battlefield until the end of 1865, taking a number of cities and asserting control over Sinaloa and Jalisco. Their advance stalled thereafter, and in 1866, Juarez's Republican forces made a startlingly fast comeback armed with American dollars and weapons. Up to that point, Americans had been busy fighting the bloodiest war in their history, but now that the United States were united once more, they were more than willing to enforce the Monroe Doctrine and thereby defend their southern border from European imperialists. Napoleon III was prudent enough to begin withdrawing troops, deciding...
Oh, this is unplugged this whole time. Embarrassing. Yeah, but that's right there, right? He spent too long. He had a very limited amount of time to conquer Mexico, and he did not conquer it in time. And because of that, I also like that was Phil Sheridan they showed. But because of that, now he knew there was a battle-hardened army that was ready. His armies were good, but he knew. He had it. I've said this in other videos. He had people watching the American Civil War. He saw what they were capable of and what we were able to do. And his biggest fear, because right now it was just guns we were giving to the Republicans. What happens when you see 5 million U.S. troops crossing the Rio Grande, or a few 100,000 crossing the Rio Grande? That's a problem.
That Mexico was not worth the damage to Franco-American relations.
Probably the most common question that I'm asked as a professor at Hillsdale is, what happened to my country?
By the end of 1866, Maximilian had been abandoned. After fleeing Mexico City and being besieged in Querétaro for a few months, the Habsburg prince, who had traveled the Atlantic expecting to be welcomed with open arms as the bridge between the Old World and New, was captured by Mexican forces. His execution took place a month later, resulting in the restoration of a Republican Juarez government and the end of French intervention in Mexico. If you want to learn more about the Franco-Mexican...
So that's going to be the end of this video. Yeah, like, can you imagine just... You're told this thing that, oh yeah, they love you, they're going to love you, they want you. And then the second Napoleon III knew the American Civil War was over, he's like, get everyone out, they're going to send troops, they're going to send... But the irony is, on our side of things, we were only arming them because we didn't think we were actually going to be capable of taking on a European army. But the thing was, we probably were. But, you know, Maximilian, he could have escaped. Carlotta returned to Europe, and she went to Paris, she went to Madrid, she went back to Brussels, begging for help. She was like, please, we need reinforcements, we need help, my husband, he's besieged. She wanted him to go with her. And he said, no, I'm going to stay here with my people, which is the most heartbreaking part of this, is that he sincerely saw the Mexican people as his people. And at the end of the day, he had a beautiful quote when he got executed. And it's so heartbreaking because he legitimately was under the assumption they wanted him because of Napoleon. Napoleon told him everything would be fine. Here, let me see. He said something beautiful. And he said it in Spanish. Give me one moment. I just want to get this off before we wrap up. It's, it was just terrible. And again, this is where you're going to see Napoleon III's, like, everything's going to be starting to get diminished because it's like, you just got beat by a ragtag army of men who really aren't well trained. So Maximilian's last words were, I forgive everyone, and I ask everyone to forgive me. May my blood, which is about to be spilled, end the bloodshed which has experienced in my new motherland. Long live Mexico, long live its independence. again, this is the heartbreaking part of this whole situation, is he actually did love Mexico. He learned the culture. He thought they wanted him there. He didn't realize he was just a pawn in the bigger game of world domination. Which I don't think Napoleon III was looking for world domination. I think he was just looking to make a mark of his own. But with his execution, this is where you're going to see real bad souring with the Austrians and the French. Because, like I said, Franz Joseph II is Maximilian's brother. And he's like, why is my brother dead now? Because of what you said. And, this is going to have a lot of repercussions. This is what's going to make the weakness apparent of what's going on in France. But with that said, thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I love doing these. This is a lot of fun. Please look at the Patreon. We have those 5 ranks. We got privates, we got sergeants, we got captains, we got colonels, and we have the marshals to join this imperial staff. Thank you so much for joining me, friends. Please, if you're able to, donate to our National Park Preservation Fund. The link will be in the description below. As per usual, if you enjoyed, please like, share, and comment. Please hit that red subscribe button. Join this ever-growing community. We love having you all on board. We're getting bigger and bigger as each day passes by. I'm so happy we're all having a good time learning history together, and we will see you in the next one.